It has been more than 48 hours since Hamas launched the biggest operation in Israel. On day 3 of Israel-Hamas war, the death toll in Israel has climbed to 800 now. Over 500 people have been killed in Gaza. The surprise attack carried out by Hamas has left Israelis livid. Their fury is directed not only at Hamas, but also at the Israeli government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Forces for failing to prevent this terrorist invasion. Analysts are flagging this as a massive intelligence failure. The intelligence gaps were undermined. What was thought to be an aggressive and successful layered approach towards Gaza by Israel. But despite the Israelis showing their dissent to ask the government, some protesters at the camp outside the Defense Ministry in Tel Aviv were attacked by pro-government supporters on bikes. On your screens, you can see that the police were there on the scene, but they did not make any arrest. One protester was even sprayed in the face or on the face with a pepper spray. But rather than arresting the attackers, the police threatened to write up the injured protesters who had been attacked before driving off and leaving the protesters to face the motorcycle gang on their own. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Minister has announced a complete siege of Gaza, cutting off food, power and fuel supply to Gaza.
We are imposing a complete siege on Gaza. There will be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything will be closed. We are fighting against human animals, and we are acting accordingly.
Israeli authorities have claimed to have hit more than 1,000 targets in Gaza and have stationed its tanks and drones on the bordering fence between Israel and Gaza, and also Israel and Lebanon. The strikes have hit housing blocks, tunnels, a mosque and homes of Hamas officials. You can see how dozens of people searched through the rubble in Gaza's Khan Younis. The Israeli military has called up an unprecedented 300,000 reservists. These are signs that Israel could be planning a ground assault to defeat Hamas. Meanwhile, Gaza's health ministry has said that more than a dozen of Palestinians have been killed and many are wounded in an Israeli airstrike on Jabalia refugee camp. Now, the Israeli forces are claiming that a number of suspects infiltrated into Israeli territory from Lebanon. The Israeli Defense Ministry has said that the situation in southern pockets of the nation has calmed down, but there are still unsecured pockets where fighting is still going on. The Israeli Prime Minister has vowed what he called mighty vengeance on Hamas. Israeli opposition leader and former caretaker Prime Minister Yair Lapid has said a ground incursion into Gaza is not off the table, but he stressed that Israel must consider the fate of the dozens of hostages that have been whisked into the enclave. And for more of this situation in Israel, our correspondent Jody Cohen has sent us this ground report.
Monday evening, we've seen further rocket fired from Hamas in Gaza into southern Israel. Now, that was following their barrage of rockets into central Israel, into places like Ra'anana, Tel Aviv, where we saw an explosion by the airport, and Jerusalem, which contains the holy sites, and several people are reportedly injured from that rocket fire. And now we've seen rocket fired from Hezbollah in Lebanon into northern Israel, and the residents in northern Israel are now being advised to stay at home and close to shelters. There have been further infiltration attempts today, both from Gaza into southern Israel from Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and now reportedly also for the first time from Islamic Jihad in Lebanon, trying to get into northern Israel, and the IDF say that they were able to stop those attempts. We know that at least 130 people have been taken hostages, mostly from Israel, but also from many, many other countries across the world, and the EU has announced that it is now stopping aid to the Palestinians as a result of this. We don't know yet whether the IDF are going to launch a ground intervention, although that's certainly being talked of. We know their priority at the moment is to stop further infiltrations into Israel from both the northern and the southern borders, and to strike Hamas, Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah targets to stop the rocket fire. This is Jodie Cohen for WION World is One.
Lester Munson is a senior fellow, National Security Institute. He's now joining us from Alexandria, Virginia. Lester, thank you very much for making time for us, and welcome to WION World is One. It's good to see you on this very important day. It's now 48 hours, more than 48 hours before after the siege in Israel began. I want to get your views on the situation in Israel, and what's the end game here?
Right. So it's hard to tell what the end game is going to be. I think we're still figuring out exactly what is happening on the ground, the situation with respect to casualties, but in particular hostages that have been taken by Hamas, Israelis who are now captive in Gaza, presumably. There may be others of other nationalities who've been taken hostage as well. I think there's a concern that this conflict could grow beyond just Israel and Gaza. I think there's a lot of discussions going on now between Israeli military leadership and allied countries such as the United States. We're in a kind of the initial stages here of sorting out the level of damage and what the consequences are going to be. Looking down the road, it seems unlikely this will be resolved very quickly, particularly given the situation with the hostages in Gaza. And as the Israeli government was indicating, it is possible there's going to be an Israeli incursion into Gaza to resolve this situation. If so, that would mean an even more prolonged conflict.
Lester, what can the international community do at this moment? Because we are seeing celebrations across various nations in support of Palestine. We are also seeing protests in support of Israel. But what can the international community do at this moment?
Well, I think the reality is there's going to be a variety of different responses from the international community. I expect Washington and European capitals to largely rally to the side of Israel. I expect Russia and perhaps some governments in the region to perhaps indicate that they're more on the side of Hamas in this question. But I think for Washington, it's going to be, what is the level of cooperation with Israel? Will the U.S. be providing additional ammunition for Israeli defense systems as this goes on? If this is a prolonged conflict, Israel will need more than just a little bit of assistance from the outside. I suspect the U.S. will provide that assistance, and others will as well.
Lester, we're also seeing another problem here in southern Lebanon. There are airstrikes that have been reported from Israel into southern Lebanon or vice versa. What threat does Hezbollah have in this conflict? Let's talk about Hezbollah and let's talk about Lebanon in general.
Sure. Lebanon, of course, is a tragic country riven by a lot of different divisions. Hezbollah is a powerful force. It is backed by Iran, as is Hamas. If Hezbollah emerges as a direct player in this conflict, that will expand the conflict beyond just between Israel and Gaza, of course, and we could see an even wider conflict in the region. So I hope that cooler heads will prevail in Lebanon and that we will not see this conflict expand to that zone. There's a lot of reports out there. These are the initial stages of war. I think we need to be skeptical of reports until we see what is really the truth. That's probably going to take a few days to sort out what exactly is happening here. But yes, the situation in Lebanon to the north of Israel is very concerning.
Finally, Lester, and I want your brief and fast response to this one. The information war that is being raged right now, what is your view about that?
Right. So there are a lot of cyber attacks going on against Israel and Israeli companies, the Israeli government, Israeli citizens right now. That appears to be part of what Hamas launched just 2 days ago. So this, while we're seeing horrific scenes on the ground of atrocities and human rights abuses and military response. There's also a whole hidden side to this in the cyber realm that is just as active and perhaps just as concerning as what's happening kind of in real life, if you will.
All right, I've been talking to Lester Munson. He is a senior fellow at the National Security Institute. Lester, thank you for talking to WION World today.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.